So today's tutorial is all about how to set rivets. People tend to find them sometimes a little bit daunting, but they are really easy. I'm going to show you some really simple ways to use hand tools if you don't have a rivet press, and here's how. Right, what we're going to need for this particular tutorial are some rivets, rubber mallet, something to punch the hole in the leather. Now that could be a rotating hole punch or just an individual set hole punch, depending on the size that you need, an awl, and then this is the hand tool for closing off rivets by hand. It's a rivet setting tool and a little anvil. So to start with, we're going to be marking the holes for the rivets. So I've got a paper template here. What we're going to be doing is grabbing the awl, placing the template right on top of your leather strap, and just indent it with a little dot from the awl so that we can see the position of the holes that we need to cut, these little dots here. And then there's two different options of ways to cut the holes. Either the rotating hole punch, which I really love these, I find them really easy. Some people in class find it perhaps just a tiny bit hard because it can be quite hard to push through the veg tan if you've got weak wrists. So of which then you might want to grab this hole punch, but we can talk about that in a second. So if you're going to be using the rotating hole punch, and just in general, what I tend to kind of look for is where that little awl dot is, you're just going to very carefully indent the leather first so that you're just checking that your hole is bang smack on top of that awl dot. Now the reason for that is if you end up just accidentally going kind of off center a little bit, when you then set the rivet, it's so noticeable that either the strap doesn't meet up properly or it just looks out of line, and we don't want that. So indent it first. Once you're really happy that your position is right, then you're going to go back in, holding the handle really nice and tight so that it comes together, and then give it a little wiggle, and then there we are, we've got a beautiful hole. So you can adjust this depending on the size of the rivet. I'm going to talk about that in a minute, but you can just adjust it round really easily, always moving it forward. You can't twist it backwards, and for the rivet that we're using, I tend to do the second to smallest. So the alternative from not using the rotating hole punch is to use the hand hole punch. Now these come in loads of different sizes, and what you can do is adjust or change the tip of it, and then you just re-screw it on. So depending on whether you get the mini or maxi punch set, you just want to vary it for the rivet size that you're using, and that relates to the stem size of the rivet. So exactly the same theory. I've got an old mat under here because what you can end up doing is punching holes in your mat, as you can see I've done here. So what we're going to do is place the tool just on top of the awl dot again, making sure that you're really holding it kind of going vertically down to the table. Give it a light little hammer. Double check that we're right bang smack in the middle, which we are, so that's all good. And then I tend to hold it quite low down on this particular tool to make sure it doesn't double jump, and then have a really nice sturdy table. Hammer 3 or 4 times, and then you get a lovely perfect hole. So we've got the 2 holes depending on which tool you have at home. to go through different types of sizes of rivets and what you're going to be looking for. So quite often they'll be referring to the size of the cap itself. So these particular ones are 9mm caps. I tend to think that these are really good size for straps and details, but you do get smaller ones and bigger ones, so it's totally up to you what size you'd like to use for your project. The next thing that they'll tell you about is the length of the stem. Now that's really important for the thickness of leather that you're going to be closing the rivet onto. So the strap that we've just made, this is 3mm thick leather, so by the time you've got 2 layers of it, it's 6 mils thick. So you just got to make sure that when your stem comes through the hole, that you've got enough room to click the cap on top, but that there's not going to be too much of that stem, so that when you squash it off that it might go lopsided. So 9mm stems tend to be what I use, 9mm stem and 9mm cap. But for example, if you wanted to do like a lot thicker leather, you could probably find stems that go up to at least sort of 12 mils long, and then vice versa. If you're going to do some thin chrome dyed leather that's only sort of 0.8 mil thick, then you're going to be looking for a stem that's much shorter, like say a 0.5 mil, something like that. And that's the most important thing really to look for, is the size of the cap plus the length of the stem. So now we're going to attach the rivet onto the trigger hook. So just quickly talking about rivets, what I tend to use is double capped rivets. So that means that you've got the nice cap on both sides. So with this particular one, this is called the stem, and this little one here is called the cap. So what you're going to do is grab the strap, pop your trigger hook on, and then what's really important is to always have the stem coming from up behind the leather, up towards you to the surface, and then the cap just clicks on top. Initially you should just be able to push it on with your thumb, and then that should just leave it kind of there, ready to actually close it off. Same with the other one, pop that one on. So the double cap rivets are really nice, particularly on straps where things are visible from the back and the front. It just means you've got a really nice finish from either side. So we'll just move those rivets out of the way. And then what we're going to be using is the anvil and the hand tool, the rivet setting tool, to close it off. On the rivet setting tool, you'll find that there's like a slightly domed side of it, and then one that's the flatter side. Now the domed one is going to go on top here. So you're going to pop your anvil underneath, rivet setting tool on top, and then what's really important is to make sure that this is vertically going down to the table, so that you don't end up kind of having it at an angle at all, because if you're not careful, sometimes the long stem of the rivet, if it's not crushed straight down, it can end up going kind of sideways, and then each side of the rivet cap kind of look like they're kind of off center. More often than not, you're then going to have to use another tool to take it out. So let's hope first time we get it right. So holding it all in position, I tend to hold quite low down on the rivet setting tool here, so that you can really make sure it's nice and stable. Initially just hit a few times to make sure it definitely is going down straight. Once you're really happy that it is, you can give it some final, like, really hard hits. And I tend to always kind of test it with my nail as well, just to kind of get underneath the cap and just feel how flat that feels. Now that feels really good. So we're going to do the same on the other one. Making sure it's definitely going straight, which it is. And there we are, really super easy.